looking for advice on your startup, we've got you because we just did a Dynasty Startup without rookies. So we're putting this out before the NFL draft. Obviously, if you do it after the NFL draft, there's a chance that you do rookies in there, but you could still split it if you're looking to do a startup. But we're going to review each one of our teams. We did a 10-team Superflex, 3 wide receiver startup, no tight end premium. So you'll see that the tight ends kind of fell a little bit here. But overall, we're very excited about our teams. So we're going to go through talk about some of our favorite picks, talk about our favorite teams and our least favorite team.
All right. So I guess I will start with mine. Team 1. So right off the top.
Because of course you had the first pick, right?
Yeah. And I guess quick plug for how we do our draft order. And this is very relevant to anyone that's watching that's in a redraft league as well. We pick different sporting events throughout the off season. So the Masters, British Open, US Open, tennis championships, home run derby, you name it. And a variation of that led to this particular draft order. I'll put a link to that video in the description as well, because definitely recommend that for your redraft leagues. Nothing really to say about Josh Allen here, but Drake May took over as the starting quarterback after week 6. He had almost 17 fantasy points per game, awful offensive line, rushed for over 400 yards. They brought in Stephon Diggs. Most of their free agent signings were on the defensive side of the ball. So now with the 9 picks they have in the draft, I really think they can build around May, likely seeing them take Will Campbell at number 4, and then hopefully a solid running back or wide receiver in the second. So very excited about him. With London, we finally saw that third-year breakout that we were hoping for once he got better quarterback play. And we did get a sneak peek of what he might look like with Michael Penix. Now, I'm not sure if that 41% target share is something that will be repeated, but
that'd be insane.
He did catch fire.
Devontae right there. Yeah.
Yeah, he did catch fire with him, the last couple weeks of the season. And then turning around with Rome Odunze in the 4th. This is a little bit more of a projection. Obviously, he had a very disappointing rookie campaign. But, we're expecting a big step forward out of this team, out of Caleb Williams, as well as Rome with, Ben Johnson now at the helm. So very excited about that. With JT, he's only 26 years old. We know how big his explosion games can be. We've seen him be the number 1 running back in fantasy. He's got 2 years left on his deal with the Colts. So there's also a situation in which that runs its course and then he pulls like a Saquon Barkley and joins a contender. With Kittle, I'm a little bit nervous about this given that he's 31 and how far some of the other tight ends fell in this draft. But I think for me, like waiting on tight end always seems fun in the draft until the actual games kick off and you have George Kittle on your team. Plus the fact that I'm going to have the number 10 pick in the rookie draft. Maybe I can get Colston Loveland. I don't know if Tyler Warren's going to fall that far to kind of build at that position for the future. With Baker, I will say this one kind of kept me up at night a little bit. And I know you texted me right after saying, "Oh, I didn't know you were going to take Baker there, blah, 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 blah." However.
Well, I think I texted you in the draft, like during the draft. I was blown away that you took your third quarterback in round 7 before you had your second running back, before you had your third wide receiver. So talk us through that.
But hear me out a little bit here. So although I was the first team to grab their third quarterback, and even though I took quarterback with my first 2 picks, for me, there was a tier break at the position after Baker. He's only 30 years old. We've seen him, go off the last couple seasons. He's on a great offense. He's got great weapons. And I'm not necessarily in love with any of the rookie quarterbacks in this year's draft class. So I don't even have to necessarily start Drake May to start the season. Like I can start Baker out. Maybe a potential trade chip. I don't know. So I'm still a little bit apprehensive about this, but I do have a really good player. And then
my deal with that was, if you want to take a third by the time you're in the 7th, like, okay, but like maybe don't have your second pick be also a quarterback, right? Now your second pick in your startup is going to be starting the year on the bench, and obviously it's short-sighted to talk about just week 1, but like, as long as Baker is playing well, Drake May is going to have to elevate his game to a place to like such a high level to even get into your starting lineup in the first year. So, maybe it changes a little bit. Maybe Baker's not as good as he's been the last 2 years, but I don't know. That one was I just struggled with that, right? If you had taken, all your skill position players, didn't have a tight end, right? And then you went quarterback in the 6th and 7th on that turn, maybe, but I just was very surprised by that.
Yeah, so we'll see how that one works out.
And it's something you did and something I don't recommend. So if you're
Yeah.
listening, whichever side you land on, because I know there are some people that really believe in like going 3 quarterbacks early, so you get that position group settled in your super flex. And in Dynasty, it's really important because we'll see my team how I ended up approaching quarterback, but it was a lot different than this.
With the next tier of guys, Godwin, Sutton, and Ridley, these are kind of my Roman Odunze insurance picks in a 3 wide receiver format. Obviously, they're all on the older side, but Godwin was on a tear before getting injured. I can play the Baker stacks on some weeks. Sutton's going to continue to be the number one, probably no matter what happens in the draft. Talks of them working on an extension. He obviously is coming off a really good year. Ridley, we know, is going to be the one, and we know that they're going to take Cam Ward. Nick Westbrook-Akine, who scores a touchdown every week, is now off the team. So that's going to be good. Even if they do select like a Luther Burden or someone early in the second round, I still like Ridley a lot for actually redraft this year, I think. But for him too, even though he's 30 years old, like he missed half a season with injury in like 2020 or whatever that was. And then he had the full season where he was suspended. So maybe not quite as many miles on the tires. And then with James Conner, like we know he's older. We know he signed a 2-year extension, but he's a top 12 running back when he's on the field. So I actually like that pick quite a lot, even though it's not going to help me in 3 years down the road. With Hollywood, he's on a 1-year extension with the Chiefs. He's only 27. With the next 3 running backs that go, the Warren pick, I actually like quite a bit. I know I got some positive reinforcement from you, which was good to see on that one.
Yeah,
but
I was going to take him for sure.
Yeah, and with him, it's like the Steelers, they have no second round pick. They need a quarterback. I don't think they're going to take running back in the first round. And I think they only have like 6 picks in the draft overall. So the likelihood that they have the luxury of selecting 2 running backs is rare. I know they will bring in one, but I don't project him to be a workhorse. I don't think that's ever what he's going to be, but he has a chance to have a good year. Gurindo, that's kind of just a handcuff for CMC. J.K. Dobbins, late round flyer. We saw how good he was last year. He's still fairly young, obviously injury concerns. And then with Kayshon Boutte, just kind of one of my guys, last pick in the draft.
Yeah, this channel loves Boutte. I will say this with your team, quickly to just wrap up. I know we spent a lot of time on it, so I'll wrap here quickly. But your team got old really fast. Like that's not something that I was anticipating seeing from you either. But Kittle 31, Baker 30, Godwin 29, Sutton 29, Ridley 30, Connor 30. That whole section of the draft is just all guys that might not be very good in 2 years. So it's going to be interesting to see how you build the rest of your roster through the draft and potential trades. Let's move on to Derek. All right, so he sniped me on Jayden Daniels. So I actually had the 3rd pick, and he was like hyping up Lamar and told me he was going to pick Lamar. And then on the clock, boom, he goes with Daniels. So I chose to pick 3rd. So I was just going to pick any of the 3 quarterbacks. I'm not broken up about that at all, but I thought that was funny. He wanted to get a second quarterback early as well, similar to you. But he did lock in Nico. So, Nico and Stroud versus May in London. I'd probably rather have May in London, but I'd rather have Nico than London there. So I just really like May. May was somebody I was considering in the second round very heavily. But we'll get to my second round pick in a bit. Bucky and Chase Brown. I mean, that's a pretty solid start at running back in Dynasty, especially if the Bengals don't address the position behind him, right? If Chase Brown is just going to be the guy, maybe Zach Moss is still there, so maybe he's healthy, but I think maybe he would take a considerable back seat going into this year, so if it isn't somebody better than him, I'm going to be pretty excited about Chase Brown this season. And he obviously ignored the position for the rest of the way. Maybe he gets one in the rookie draft, but the rest of the receivers are really good. Devontae Smith, still young. He's the number 2, ideally, right? He's better when AJ Brown or Goddard doesn't play. But then Metcalf and Pickens got both of those guys same team. So, maybe Pickens gets traded during the draft, but also I think both of them can be productive this season. We did have question marks around them because we don't know who the quarterback is going to be yet. So that's a little bit outstanding at the wide receiver position there. He took Tucker Kraft maybe a little higher than he would have liked, I think. But he was pretty locked in on getting him there. And I know there's a lot of people that like him quite a bit. 24 years old, could be very productive, very explosive player. He's one of the few tight ends that can actually score a 40, 50-yard touchdown. And then he filled out his receiver core, Samuel, Pittman, Tillman, I think Tillman has the most upside of that group and is obviously the youngest, but the other guys are a little bit stabilizers, which I think is good.
Yeah, the only thing I will say about this team is that we had a little bit of a snafu in the draft. Just to call Derek out, he accidentally selected Hollywood Brown, and then he got to reverse course and select Cedric Tillman when Tillman was in my queue ready to be selected. So no hard feelings there. I wish him the best. I obviously love Tillman, but yeah, overall, I do like this team. And I guess I'll let you take 3 because it is your team, and then we can go back to switching off.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, my whole approach, especially early, was youth. Like it was so important to me. So I my reasoning for taking the third pick is I was just going to take one of the elite quarterbacks first. And then as I was kind of prepping in a 10-team setting, it was a lot easier. I decided to just wait at my second quarterback. Like I was going to just wait until the end, get the last one of the top 20 to 23 guys that fell. And that guy was Tua for me. And I'm actually pretty excited about that. Obviously, he carries a considerable level of injury risk, but when he's on the field, he performs like a top, 12, 14 type quarterback with upside for a touch more than that, depending on what type of offense they have running around him. So I was pretty happy with that in the 11th round. I think that's a very rare situation where you get somebody like that late. And then I rented out with Russell Wilson. So I also, at this point in the draft, I have the 8th pick in the rookie draft. I didn't want to close the door on being able to pick Shedeur Sanders and have him on my active roster. Our league setup only allows 3 quarterbacks on your active roster. And so I decided to take that approach, thinking that I'm either going to get Sanders or trade up and get Ward. So anyways, that's where I was at with the quarterback position. Youth early, right? I mean, I went Brian Thomas Jr., 22, second year, Ladd McConkey, 23, second year, Trey McBride, 25, third year, Xavier Worthy, 21, second year, Waddle, 26, fifth year, and Jameson Williams, 24, third year. So it's just like I feel so good about that core of receivers and pass catchers if you include the tight end. And I'm very excited about that. I view running back as the most fleeting asset in Dynasty. And, you see guys, if your team is ready to compete, you see guys like Derrick Henry getting passed around for second round picks sometimes. And it's just like, if I am in contention, I feel like maybe I go and make a move kind of like that. But I do think I rounded out my running backs pretty well. Considering how late I waited, right? I got David Montgomery, who I think is going to be borderline top 20, and I think a very stable piece at the position. Tyrone Tracy, he's a 25-year-old second-year player, not the most ideal. I kind of wish I would have gone Pearsall with that pick, honestly, but he was pretty good and was a former receiver, so he could have some pass catching upside. Brian Robinson, obviously very stable, touchdown scorer. Doesn't have a ton of upside, but if I need somebody in a pinch, he's solid and he's only 25. Aaron Jones is probably going to be my week 1 starter, so I was pretty happy to get him where I did. He's got Jordan Mason coming in to compete with now, so the dynamic might be a little different than last year, but I don't expect him to play as much as he did last year, and I didn't even expect him to play as much as he did last year when it was happening. So I do like that pick, and then Brooks is kind of just like a future stab. So Keenan Allen, we'll see if he signs where he signs. He might not be on my roster in a month. So, we'll see. We'll see how that all plays out. But yeah, I really, really like this team and how it played out. My strategy with the quarterback, I feel like worked out really well. And just hammering wide receivers that are young early, I think, or was obviously my strategy in the way I think is the best way to approach a startup draft.
Yeah, when I was looking through some of my favorite picks, I kind of bundled BTJ and Ladd together. I really like those round 2 and 3 picks. And then it's funny because Waddle, I actually thought he was going to make it to me where I picked Kittle and Baker. And as much as we've talked about being out on Waddle in redraft the last couple of years, like, Tyreek's not going to be around forever. And if Waddle does become that one, I like him a lot. I will say I do like your team quite a bit. The only thing just to pick at it, I don't like the Cooper Kupp pick there at all. I think he's kind of washed potentially. I think that the fact that the Rams gave up on him as a smart organization and brought in an older player is kind of a telltale sign he might be at the end of his life in his career. But I get it. I totally get it, because if he starts out hot, you can be patient with JMO, Waddle, maybe even Worthy in some cases. But overall, really like your team. Jumping over to team.
And just to give you context on the Kupp pick, if you want to go back real quick, I started looking at my flex player, right? Who am I going to put at flex? It could be JMO, right, to start off the year. But if Tyreek Hill doesn't get traded, he's Waddle is not a starter. So as
Right.
much as I wanted to pick Waddle and, looking ahead, he's going to be the number one in the offense at some point, and I really like him when that happens. But Cup, I felt like was somebody that I could use up early in the year, maybe all
Yeah.
season. And, I don't need a ton from him. And if I'm not competing, maybe I can get a second or a third round pick type of thing to somebody, if he's doing well, to somebody who is competing. So anyways, that was the thought with Cup there in the 10th.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Jumping over to team 4, Michael's team. It is interesting because Michael decided to forgo the number 1 pick and opted to take pick 4. He went with Ja'Marr Chase. Hard to argue with that. In 3 wide receiver, Ja'Marr Chase is just awesome. Turning around to get Brock Bowers, he's a stud. He's probably one of the more untradeable guys in Dynasty. Again, Devon Etienne, considered the RB3 in Dynasty, I guess until Genty gets drafted. CMC, there's obviously risk there, but this team is going to be tough. I mean, look at those running backs. Like if, we know what Henry is, CMC's awesome, Achane's awesome. He's got the number 1 wide receiver. He's got the number 1 tight end. My biggest concern with this team is really at the quarterback position. Like T-Law has been uninspiring, but he did get a new head coach. He's got Brian Thomas Jr., so hopefully he can take a step forward, but it's been a bit. And with Penix, like I know the community loves him. I know we saw flashes at the end of the year, but paired with Bryce Young, who got benched last season, who, we like to take a step up and grow this year too. There's just a little bit too much risk with that trio for my blood. I guess with Kelsey, kind of a random pick, but I get it, right? If Kelsey comes out and is awesome and he wants to be to trade him to a contender, there could be some value there.
Yeah, for me, like in Dynasty, if you're gonna play a super flex, like don't do this. Don't do this to yourself. Like you're just at such a disadvantage at the quarterback position. I have both of those guys ranked outside of my top 20 at quarterback this year, and it's just like, maybe they step up and they're 15 or they're 12, and it's just like neither of them are. It's just I don't feel like either of them have a chance to be a game changer. So I could be wrong on that, but like picking an old running back McCaffrey, an old running back Henry before you go in at the quarterback position, even if don't feel like you're like very inspired at the position for anybody, like find somebody that you want before that range of quarterback, because I just really struggle with this build because like it started out so good. I mean, Chase, Bowers, Etienne, if he would have gone quarterback there, and locked in somebody that he liked over McCaffrey, I think I would have probably liked this team better. Now, his argument might be, we're already at the Jared Goff range anyways. Like, why would I pick them when I can wait 2 rounds and take Penix or 3 rounds and take Penix? And there's something to be said for that. But I don't know. I don't know. I just struggle with it so much. I don't know. Maybe instead of Achane, I should have gone with a quarterback and tried to stabilize the position at that point. But overall, I mean, it's going to be a really hard team to beat this year. Like, I think for this season, his team's a lot better than mine. But like you said about the running backs, right? I mean, if McCaffrey stays healthy and then he's got Etienne and Henry, good luck beating that. He's got Chase. I mean, obviously his receivers are a little weak, but even still, like Chase, Addison, Jennings, like that could be a really good trio. So, if the quarterbacks play well enough to keep him in games, he's going to be able to win quite a few games this year, I think. I'm just afraid of how old it's going to get and how much he's going to get left behind at the quarterback position. Going on to the 5th team here now, we've got Joe Burrow up top. So I was thinking that this guy was going to pick Justin Jefferson. So when he went Burrow and then he went Knicks, it was like, oh, wow, okay, you've got 2 quarterbacks in your first 3 picks. I was really hoping Puka Nacua was going to drop to me. Obviously, I got Brian Thomas Jr., so it's hard for me to complain about the position, but I was really, really hoping for Puka. I think he's excellent. I think he came back from injury and showed that he is just the alpha in the offense. And Stafford is just so good at getting the ball to his number 1. And then Rashee Rice, I didn't like that pick that much, little tough there just because of the injury and the unknown looming suspension. Plus, the offense is going to be different, right? They have Worthy, who's coming off a very strong end of the year, and they also have Hollywood, who should be there all year now. So the offense, I think, is going to look different in a way that I wouldn't have taken Rice this high. Now, I could be wrong on that, but I'm just hesitating there. Going down to McLaurin now, he's a little older too. Like that's somebody that I thought was a little bit of a reach there, even though he should be good this year. Another fleeting asset where I wasn't super sold on that. I don't know. I would have much rather had the 2 players I took in this range. So, that kind of was a surprise to see him go that early. Pearsall I really like, and Shakir I really like too. Those guys are both younger, could step into huge roles in their offense this year. And then Adonai Mitchell and Wan'Dale Robinson kind of just dart throws at the end. Looking at his running backs, I really do like his running backs, actually. I think he did a really good job setting up the position for as late as he started. Chuba Hubbard, he should be awesome this year, right? He legitimately can challenge to be a top 10 running back this year. Jonathan Brooks won't be back. They signed Rico Dowdle as backup behind him, but I don't think there's any sort of challenge there to Hubbard's workload. Kamara, again, going to challenge to be a top 10 running back. He's just got so much of a floor with that receiving game work. And then Ramondre Stevenson, if they pick Genty, that's obviously not going to look good. But Ramondre Stevenson does have a contract, right? He did sign a second contract with New England. So those are the type of guys that I do try and look for in general. And getting him as late as he did, I think he can get some production out of that spot as well. And then Charbonnet, that's obviously tied to Ken Walker, right? But if he's in a situation where he gets to use him multiple games in a season, that pick will work out. And that's somebody where he's still really young. I still definitely think he's going to get an opportunity at some point down the line. But right now, maybe not. So, but I think the position is really strong. LaPorta and Njoku at tight end. I mean, he's got 2 top 10 guys for me this year. I think he probably is regretting the LaPorta pick a little bit with how late he got Njoku. But, I don't know. It's hard to argue with LaPorta. He was really good in the second half of the year. He started out so bad, wasn't getting any targets. And then they changed the offense back through him. You got a lot of targets end the year, and I think he should be very productive.
All right, team 6. This is kind of the Eagles team with Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, and A.J. Brown. But, looking at the quarterback position, this is the only team that didn't select a third quarterback, so they could be in a position to potentially take Shedeur. Would not expect Cam Ward to be there at the 5th pick. But at the running back position, I mean, they're going to be insane, right? Gibbs, Barkley, Jacobs. Really love that trio. Pacheco, I actually don't really love that pick whatsoever. I know he's kind of trending down. He's on the last year of his deal. I wouldn't expect him to sign, for a major contract after his time with the Chiefs is up. We'll see what the Chiefs do in the draft. Jalen Wright, like that pick, obviously he's got a lot of upside. If Etienne misses time, could be a must-start player. Algier, again, just kind of sticking with the theme of the handcuff running back. I will say with his wide receivers, this is where it gets a little bit tough. I mean, with A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, and Jerry Jeudy, you're in line to have some pretty massive spike weeks. Like this team, I talked about it with team 4 being tough to beat when it's, firing all cylinders. This one will be very tough to beat as well with that trio. But the issue is Jeudy had some flashes when it was Jameis Winston. Tyreek Hill, what if he regresses? A.J. Brown, we know he can disappear on some weeks. And then with Josh Downs, it's as much as I like him as a player, you're competing with him, Pittman. What if they bring in Tyler Warren? We've got A.D. Mitchell. Alec Pierce was the leading receiver on that team last year. Not to mention you've got Anthony Richardson throwing him the ball. So long term, I think Josh Downs will figure himself out. But in terms of having to start him this year, that's going to be a little bit tricky. And Shaheed coming off injury, he was a darling of Derek Carr's eye. If Carr is not the starter, is it going to be the same fit? Mims, we'll see. He's got some upside. He finished strong, but he can also just as easily disappear. And actually, one of my favorite picks is his tight end, getting Mark Andrews in the 14th round. I mean, I know Andrews ended on a sour note in the playoffs. I know they're talking about trading him, but he's only 29 years old, and he's either going to stick in the same role that he's been on, or if he gets traded to the Chargers, for example, his value can either stay the same or go up. So that was actually one of my favorite picks. So theme with this team is they're going to have some really big blow up weeks, but it can get scary fast at the wide receiver position.
I agree, because I think obviously getting Gibbs and Saquon on the same team that has Hurts on it, right? That just gives you a level of upside. But the receivers are a little suspect. He did get Downs, which I think is good kind of anchor for long term, but with A.J. Brown, I mean, he's still pretty young. I mean, I in the 4th round, it's hard to argue there, but Tyreek Hill, he's getting older. It could be two years for him before he's not really anything. And Jeudy, like you said, he broke out last year, but it was a large part because of his time playing with Winston in that 250-yard game. So,
yeah. Not to mention, they're probably going to take Hunter at 2. So that's going to make it even more crowded.
Yeah, and he did snipe me on Jeudy. I did kind of want Jeudy. Because he is 25, and it was late enough where I was like, you know what, I think Judy could continue to build on this if they do address the quarterback position, as long as it's not Watson. But anyways, I think this team is in pretty good position to compete this year in a big way. I think it's going to be really hard to beat this team. Going over to Goody's team, so he was the one that ended up going in on Bijan in the first round, right? So running back with your first pick in a startup is always going to be risky, but Bijan finished the year so strong last year. He's so young. I think it's an excellent pick, honestly. I think starting off like that in the second half of the first round is giving you a big advantage at a different position that hasn't gotten picked yet. So I think that, he ended up going Caleb and Love, who are both young, good quarterbacks right away, addressing the quarterback position, right? Because I talked about how important it is to get one early. So getting both of them, I liked a lot. I think, top 12 for both of them in terms of a dynasty context. And I'm not as big on Caleb this year in particular, but I do think that there's a chance that he takes a major step forward with the offensive line additions they've made and with Ben Johnson. So like the quarterback picks there. He got Breece Hall in the fourth round. I thought that was interesting, passing on any receivers, but it is hard to argue with Hall. I mean, he is still really young and really talented. It's just, are the Jets going to be not a mess this year? Are they going to let him be the bell cow? There's also been, rumors swirling that they want to mix it up, that they want to have a committee, that they might trade him. So there's some question marks around Hall. Rounding out his running backs, right? He took a shot on Etienne, took a shot on Pollard. I think Pollard could be a decent flex, so getting him that late I think was good. But the receivers is where I think he actually ended up doing pretty good for waiting until round 5. Zay Flowers, obviously we've talked about him as a boom bust. DJ Moore is pretty solid as a number 1 for Caleb Williams, so he's got that stack. If they're both going off, they're both clicking, that could fuel his team in a big way. And then Mike Evans, I know he's older, but getting him this late here, I think, is good for rounding out your starting positions, because you're not going to be finding a combination of youth and production at this point. So, when you're in need of a starter, I think I like that pick quite a bit. And then he went right back to the youth for the rest of the position group, with Leggett going into a second year. Tank Dell obviously going to be out this whole year, and he's a major question mark, but at least he's young. Has a decent chance to bounce back for next year. And then Bateman, who's still only 25 years old and is the number 2, had his best season this past year. You and I have talked down on Bateman, but I started to come around last year in a way that maybe I'm going to move over to the dark side and think he's decent value. And then he double tapped tight end. I personally wouldn't have done that. I would have just taken one. But if you haven't taken one at that point, taking a shot on 2 of them and seeing what works out, I think isn't a bad strategy.
All right, so for Team 8 at the quarterback position, taking Mahomes in the first round. Obviously, Mahomes had a tough year from a fantasy perspective, but I will say the advantage of having Mahomes in a Superflex format is at least he has a very high floor. I mean, last year he didn't score below 14 points in any given week. Jared Goff has been awesome the last few years, consistently finishing in the top 10, so I really like that pick. And then with Sam Darnold, this could be a huge value if Sam Darnold actually found his game versus being a product of the Minnesota system. So still fairly young at the position. I think Goff's the oldest at 30. So I like those quarterbacks, but the wide receivers I'm just obsessed with at the top.
Yeah,
I did not
ridiculous.
I did not expect Malik Nabers to go here. I thought he would have been taken over Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's an argument to be had about that, but there's a decent chance Malik Nabers is the number 1 wide receiver heading into next year's startup drafts. Garrett Wilson, love Garrett Wilson, but just the JSN pick in the 4th round is just stealing. I love that pick. I considered him much earlier. Just not enough good things to say about that. And Ayuk, he's still young. He's coming off a major injury, but there's a chance, during the draft, they trade him and he ends up being a team's number 1 or number 2, or he comes back healthy and resumes that position in San Francisco. McMillan, he showed very strong flashes. Godwin and Evans aren't going to be around forever. Diggs, this was kind of a little bit of almost a luxury pick in some regard, just because he can probably play him this year, but the long term isn't going to be so great. And then rounding out with Alec Pierce, again, last round pick, but he did, lead the team in yards last year, and Richardson loves to throw it deep. At the running back position, he's got Kyron and Joe Mixon. With Kyron, it's I feel like the last couple of years, it's just talk bad about Kyron. He's small, he's not fast, he's this, he's that. And then he gets on the field and he scores 2 touchdowns and touches the ball 25 times. You're talking about extending, and we'll see if that happens. With Mixon, he was obviously a stud this year. Swift, we'll see. We assume they're going to address running back in a big way in the draft, but you never know. And then with Corum, like this pick late. And then at the tight end position, Kyle Pitts, I guess, whatever. He still has the upside in his game, I guess. And then I don't know. I can't say anything
Forever
about
upside. Yeah.
Forever upside. Yeah. I mean, did you watch him at Florida? But yeah.
Right.
So I don't know. And then I actually like the Likely pick a lot more at his ADP, just because if Andrews does get traded, we've seen what Likely can do when he gets a chance to get the ball.
Yeah, JSN is the one that stands out. I had in the third round, right? I was the third pick of the third round, and it was Ladd or JSN. Those were my 2 that I had on my board. I decided to go Ladd, homer pick, younger, a little bit more upside. I felt like with Justin Herbert throwing him the ball, but watching JSN drop an entire round past that, I was like, oh, woof. I know this owner is especially stoked on having JSN as well. So, and I don't blame him. Moving on to team 9 now. We've got the first and only build that went wide receiver to start. Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would like this better if it was Jefferson and Nabers, but it's hard to argue with Amon-Ra St. Brown in terms of production. Still is very young himself. Established quarterback, established offense, and I know Ben Johnson's moving on, but I think he's kind of the clear one. He's taken a major step forward in touchdowns the last 2 years as well. He's got double-digit touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. So can't say enough good things about Amon-Ra St. Brown. Marvin Harrison, I thought was a good pick in the 4th round, but it's not a pick that I was looking to make. And maybe that's my fault for, not going in on somebody last year who was considered, such a high-end prospect, 4th overall pick in the real NFL draft. And, I just struggled because Kyler is not good at throwing the deep ball, I guess, and just anything past the line, anything 10 yards past the line of scrimmage is just so bad for Kyler. And that's kind of where Harrison's game was being utilized in the offense. So I either hope they change the offense, get him more targets closer to the line of scrimmage, or that they figure out a way to get Kyler more efficient down the field. So that kind of pairs with his first quarterback there, Kyler. He took that Kyler Harrison stack. So I think that was also part of his plan. Looking down the board a little bit on the rest of his receivers, you got Devontae Adams. I think that's a great pick for a flex spot. Jacoby Myers, we obviously love him. He's only 28, still going to be the number 1. I expect him to continue to stay the number 1 in the offense. And they got Geno throwing him the ball now. I think he's going to be wheels up. Jalen Coker, I thought, was a solid pick too. Young guy, didn't get drafted last year in the NFL draft, but they really like him out in Carolina. And then Dontavian Wicks and Jalen Tolbert, dart throws at the end of the draft. Looking at the running back position now, you've got James Cook and Ken Walker. Those 2 are young and very good. So to get them in the 5th and 6th rounds, I thought was kind of a steal for this team's setup. I was very impressed with the ability to go back to back there. And in Dynasty, going back to back running backs is always just like difficult to do. It's just like, oh God, am I really going to go back to back running back here? Am I gonna like kind of waste these picks, or am I going to use these picks on a fleeting asset? Like, how is that going to go? But I think I like both of these picks, right? They're both young. Neither of them have a second contract yet. So that kind of worries me a little bit, but I think they're both going to get that. And whether or not it's with their current teams or with another team, I think they're both set up for more long-term success, especially 3+ years. And then, a couple of dart throws on Mason and on Javonte, so we'll see how that works out. I kind of think that those 2 guys might be off his team in the first 3 weeks of the season. So, anyways, he's got the 2 solid starters and he can fill out that position as needed. And then Hockenson, right? I think that's kind of like the last tight end that I'm even interested in trying to get, within my rankings. I have Kittle over him, and, obviously Warren, I think, will be over him for Dynasty, but then, after the Bowers McBride, Kittle and Hockenson, it's kind of tough at tight end out there, and tough to figure out when to take them after that. So I did like the Hockenson pick there, especially. And then I mentioned Kyler with Marv, so I won't go over that at the quarterback position, but he did take Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields. I thought that was pretty interesting because those are like very athletic quarterbacks that are very good for fantasy when they're on the field, but when they're not, or if they have issues, or if they're completing 30 or 40% of their passes, it's just like a little bit difficult to necessarily think that they have super, super high upside if they aren't rushing for touchdowns. So, which they can do, right? So I think it was interesting to see that he kind of went fishing on the high upside athletic quarterbacks twice, and we'll see how that works out for him.
Yeah, and you and I were kind of arguing back and forth a little bit, how I was making the argument that this doesn't necessarily box him out of taking Cam Ward, because there's not a good chance, but there's a chance that Richardson and Fields aren't starters in the next couple years as well. So maybe throwing Ward on the taxi squad and just kind of letting that situation play out. But on the flip side, I understood your argument, whereas if Ward is awesome, you're going to have to cut Justin Fields or maybe Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
There's a lot of risk at the quarterback position. But the upside with those athletes is pretty good. So overall, I actually like this team a lot. I always aesthetically love teams that start heavy on wide receiver, and this one's pretty good. And then rounding out,
I will say he took Marvin Harrison over JSN, and I would like this team. And he took Amon-Ra over Nabers. I would like this team so much better if it was Nabers and JSN over Amon-Ra and Marvin Harrison for Dynasty. And again, if I don't know if you're listening, I don't know how you have that ranked, but I definitely think that Nabers is ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I definitely think that Jackson Smith-Njigba is ahead of Marvin Harrison.
I would agree with that, but those are also pretty good players. So we'll see. And with Harrison, it's like we could have a completely different conversation a year. If we know his pedigree, if they change the offense, like that could look like a very different take.
He could be so good next year. He could be JSN,
Yeah, you never know. We'll see. A couple Ohio State boys, but for Team 10, I will say this was probably my least favorite team. I guess addressing the quarterback position. I like Herbert a lot. I can see having him over Caleb Williams and Drake May. Personally, I didn't have it that way, just kind of betting on youth, but great player. Dak, 31, coming off a major injury. He should still be good for a while. I still like Dak, but with Stafford as well, he's getting older. But I will say with this team, there were a few picks that I just couldn't really get behind. The first one being T. Higgins, just being over Marvin Harrison and JSN. We know T was, fantastic on a per game basis, but he misses a lot of games. So that one, concerns me a little bit. Olave, I love. So hopefully, if Shedeur does go there could be a little bit more upside for Olave because Derek Carr absolutely hates him. Jayden Reed, he was off to a torrid start last year. So hopefully, Green Bay can design the offense to get him involved a little bit more. Keon Coleman, we'll see. I obviously really like him. I talked about him a lot in the offseason. I hope he takes a step forward. It's just tough with Buffalo because they just have a crowd of guys, and it's just hard to determine who's the ball's going to go to. QJ, whatever. He kind of ran hot on touchdowns, but I do not like Quentin Johnston. Troy Franklin, kind of a dart throw at the end there. At the running back position, I will say the caveat is, he's going to be getting Genty at 1, but for me, it's tough looking at the rest of the guys, and it's like, who's going to be the starter alongside him week 1? Like maybe Rashad White. Tajay Spears, I will say I do like in Dynasty. He's very young. He's very electric. We'll see how that plays out. Trey Benson, again, great handcuff. Eventually, hopefully will be the heir apparent. And then Estime, he was everyone's favorite waiver wire pickup, whatever week that was, that didn't really pan out. But definitely don't hate that pick whatsoever. As much as I kind of poo-pooed on this team, I just think it's more so because there were a couple picks, that he took that I thought were above ADP, one of them being Dalton Kincaid. I just don't know if we're going to see the Dalton Kincaid that we saw at Utah or that we want him to be, whether it's been snap share or target share or just dropping passes or not having the yak ability that made him a first-round pick. We'll see. And then Cade Otton, I don't think that was really a necessary pick. So overall, I would say this is kind of my least favorite team, and I feel bad because I don't know this person personally. So maybe you want to say a couple words about your buddy.
Yeah, no, and this is Adam, and he knows that I'll be hating on his team a little bit. But yeah, the Higgins thing, I mean, I get that he just got locked in to the Bengals. So that's like an interesting thing that happened not that long before this draft. And I think there was a lot of uncertainty around him in Dynasty, a lot of uncertainty around his on the field production going into last year. And obviously was getting hurt, but he got locked in and he was the second highest scoring receiver on a per game basis last year. So I understand JSN, right? Both of us are like, oh, JSN, but I don't hate that pick over Marv. Like I don't, maybe I'm a hater on Marv and maybe I'm going to be so wrong, but I just feel so burned on him from last year that I don't have a problem with it over Marv, I guess. Dak is somebody I don't think he needed to pick there. Like he could have just waited until the next round and he could have filled running back there with Breece Hall. Or instead of Kincaid, he could have picked Ken Walker. And then like if he would have picked a running back in one of those picks, I think he would have been fine. And we saw how late all of the tight ends ended up falling. So I'm sure he's feeling the same way about Kincaid, that he could have waited at tight end, picked a running back there, and he'd feel a lot better about where his team is, because I think his top three receivers are in a really good spot, honestly. Obviously Olave fell quite a bit, and he's somebody that I was considering in the 5th round. And he made it all the way to him at the end of the 5th round. So, if it was JSN and Breece Hall instead of Higgins and Dak, and then he picked whoever was there in the 6th round at quarterback, I think we talked about this team a lot different.
And I guess like with the Dak thing, just being picked 2 rounds ahead of Jared Goff and a round ahead of Purdy was just too rich for my blood.
So just to review quickly, overall favorite picks, right? Here's the draft board. If you guys want to pause at this point and talk about your favorite picks, we obviously highlighted JSN. I think that's like one of the best picks in the draft overall. I also really liked the Metcalf pick. I think, signing a long-term deal and then getting him as late as he did. I mean, it felt like he was just so late in the draft. He went in the 7th round. I thought that was a really good pick. I had all of the intention to pick Metcalf. I hung on the clock for a long time before deciding to take Jameson Williams. Some of the other picks too, Devontae Adams, I think he's still 32, but I still think he could be really good this year. So if you build out your whole team and get him as a flex, I think that's an excellent pick there. I was surprised that he kind of lingered around in the 9th round there. I considered taking him in the 9th, but I didn't have a second running back, and I was still looking at Pearsall like youth there. So maybe other people are doing the same. And then I obviously like my Brian Thomas pick. I think that's somebody that I wasn't anticipating getting. I had talked to a lot of the guys in the league, and I definitely thought he was going to go earlier than my pick. So the fact that he fell all the way to me, I was like, okay, I'm all in on Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, the BTJ, because I knew he was going to stop at you if he got there, but I was hoping that Nico would get pushed down to me, and then I can take Nico with May or Nico in London. But I definitely really like those picks. And then I talked about Mark Andrews as well.
So a couple of my least favorite picks. We can start off on my team, Tyrone Tracy. I struggled with that so much. I wanted to pick Pearsall. I immediately regretted not taking Pearsall. So like Tracy was definitely one of my least favorite picks in the draft, even after reviewing it. I got Brian Robinson so much later. I got Aaron Jones so much later, and I could figure out running back after that. Those guys are going to play over Tracy likely anyway. So if for nothing else, to highlight, wait on running back once you're down at that area. Your Baker Mayfield pick, I just still can't get behind that. If you go quarterback, don't do this to yourself either. Like you could have waited and taken Bryce Young 3 rounds later. Like I think that would have been fine as your 3rd quarterback, and you wouldn't have had to go so high, and you could have got in on a younger, higher level player there. And then a couple other ones. Joe Mixon, I know he was in need of a quarterback. I know, or in need of a running back. I know Mixon is still in a good position. I don't know. He just faded so hard against strong matchups at the end of the year last year. And I'm worried about the offense overall, right? I mean, they just underperformed in such a big way. And if it swings at all back towards the offense, the passing game offense picking up, I just don't think he's necessarily going to be super valuable. To talk about one more again that I mentioned when we were going through the teams with Sam LaPorta, I think that was maybe just a little bit too high based on seeing where everybody else went. I did forget to mention him when I was talking about Hockenson too, so I wanted to bring him back up as one of those top end tight ends, one of the top 5. But I think if that owner had to do it over again after watching where all of these tight ends went, they maybe would have waited there. So overall, we had a ton of fun with this. We drafted the first 4 rounds all together on the first day. Then we slow drafted the rest of the time. We got through it in like 3 or 4 days. It was awesome. So Highly recommend doing a dynasty startup if you get the chance. And anything else to add before we sign off here?
No, man. Can't wait for the actual draft and then for the rookie draft.
Yeah, I can't either. All right. So we'll talk to you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching.